Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where together we will learn from personal stories and explore thought-provoking topics, all with one goal in mind: living a more purposeful life. Welcome, everybody, to episode 191 of the On Purpose podcast. This week, we bring to you Whitney Lyn Allen and her powerful story of thriving through grief as a result of losing her husband at a young age and navigating the world of parenting alone. Her inspiring story is coming up next. And before we bring that to you, I want to ask you to pay your debt to the show, pay your debt to our On Purpose community by sharing, liking, reviewing the podcast, and considering joining us at patreon.com, where your financial contributions can help push us towards our lofty goal of becoming one of the most impactful podcasts in the world. Join us at patreon.com/the On Purpose podcast, and you'll find membership options that'll fit any budget and provide you the satisfaction of knowing you just made somebody's life and days a little better. All right, let's get you all to this interview with Whitney Lyn Allen. Whitney, welcome to the On Purpose podcast. It's our honor to have you here today with us, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation today.
Oh, man. Yeah, your story is powerful. I first came across you on LinkedIn, and I was kind of just watching what you were writing and sharing a bit. And I knew getting you on our show was just a matter of time. And what better way than to have you as one of our kickoff 2023 powerful stories.
Awesome. I'm so grateful to be here. Thanks again.
Whitney, do me a favor. Tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of introduce yourself to our On Purpose community.
Oh gosh. That's hard because I feel like I'm such a different person than I was just a year ago. But surface level, I'm first and foremost a mom to my two sons, Jackson, who is 4, he will be 5 in February, and my son Leo, who is almost 11 months, so he will be 1 in January. I am a lawyer, not currently practicing, but I feel in my past lifetime, a medical malpractice defense attorney. And right now I decided to do my own thing and become a certified grief counselor. So that is something that will be done. I will be certified at the end of January. And I am also an author. My book, Running in Trauma Stilettos, will be out in the world in February 2023. So a lot going on, a lot of new stuff happening.
Nice. Running in Trauma Stilettos.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds hard.
It's impossible.
Yeah. So now your book, is it going to be on Amazon? Did you self-publish? How did you get into this?
So it is self-published. So after my late husband, Ryan, his accident in October in 2021, which I'm sure we'll get into, and after his death in April of 2022, I felt a calling to write about my experience that me and my family had gone through, dealing with a very sick spouse, family member, and then all of the grief and trauma that goes with that. And during his ordeal between his accident and his death, there were so many emotions, so much complexity to the experience that I didn't feel there was anything, any books, any podcasts that I could find that I could even relate to on even a surface level. So I wanted to create that for other people because I kept getting messages saying, I'm going through a hard time, not necessarily dealing with a sick spouse or becoming a widow, other widows, but from other people having drug abuse problems or getting out of a bad relationship. They just felt very compelled to share with me because I was sharing my story online and Ryan's journey And I felt like I needed to create this work of art for these people to give them a real sense of what trauma and grief is like, without any romanticism, no editing. I don't do myself any favors in this book. It's very real and raw, um, and authentic to how I was during the experience and how it was. And I did decide to self-publish because, if your readers don't know, traditional publishing, once you get a traditional publisher, it can take up to 2 years to get a book out in the world. And I thought this was an immediate need. So I went the self-publishing route.
Wow. Yeah, we do a lot of authors and book writing on the show, so they're familiar with that. And I think I would bet you to say 90% of our guests that are authors all self-publish as well, just because it's in today's age, it's a way to get right to your community as fast as you can.
Exactly. And it will be available on Amazon. So, your listeners will be able to get that
Whoa,
when
whoa,
it comes
whoa,
out.
Whitney. Our listeners. They're ours. You're part of the family now. They're not just mine.
All
Well,
right.
yeah, well, and here's what I got. Before we get going too deep, I got to warm you up.
Mhm.
Like our community is used to getting you warmed up. I don't want you pulling any muscles or anything with the heavy, purposeful lifting we're going to do here. But
Okay.
I am impressed by just your timeliness of things. Like this is recent stuff you went through. A lot of times people are writing about stuff or sharing stories that are years or decades in their past, but you're actually pretty much chronicling it while you're still working through it because it's so recent.
Yep. And the only way I can explain that is I just felt so compelled and called to this work to help other people going through a similar experience. And I couldn't even sit still,
Yeah,
like before I finished my book. Like it was just the words were coming out of me. Like I felt like I just needed to get this out into the world. So it's not something like I sat down and said, I need to do this. I just felt compelled to do so.
sure. Yeah, that's powerful. All right, let's warm you up real quick and then we're gonna get into the heavier stuff here. Whitney, talk to
Okay.
me. All right, we want to know you get trapped on an island. You're on a
hmm
deserted island for the rest of your life. You get one food to eat. What will Whitney be eating?
Okay. Well, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, it's your work. It's your island. You can take whatever you want.
Um, will it affect my health, or is this like a world where it doesn't matter what I eat, I'll be healthy?
I don't know. I mean, how's your island operate? You're gonna be pretty physically active on the island. You're gonna run laps around it and like climb trees and stuff.
Well, I'm thinking, if I'm on an island that, I don't want to feel unhealthy and gross. So I was gonna say chocolate cake because that's my favorite thing in the whole world. But I probably have to say coffee because I don't want a major headache while I'm on my island.
Yeah, coffee's a good one too. All right, yeah, you can have coffee and chocolate cake. You can do both.
All right, I'll do that. That
All
sounds
right.
good.
All right, Whitney, you get one superpower. What power would you want and why do you want it?
Oh, wow. Probably to be able to die and then come back. And so I can see my late husband.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a good one. Favorite book?
I have a lot of favorite books. Trying to think of the most recent one. Uh, I'm reading a book about it's called First you know what? I'm not even sure what the title is. I'll have to look. But it's about um moving into your next life or next stage of life after you lose a spouse.
Mhm.
Second first, that's what it's called. So that's what I'm reading right now, and I'm really enjoying that. I think it's a really good compilation of tangible tips in order, when you're in the situation as a young widow, What can you do to kind of honor your late spouse, but also step into this new life that you're now having to live? So
Yeah, that's good.
that's that. Yeah, that's what I'm reading right now.
Yeah, that's a huge balancing act there that I don't think many people would even be aware of.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right, you get to have dinner with one person, either currently with us or may have passed on. Who is it, and what do you want to ask them?
Oh, well, that's easy. I would want to have dinner with my husband, Ryan, who passed away. And I only have one question I can ask him, or is it several?
You can ask whatever. You can have chocolate cake, coffee, and ask multiple questions. What do you want to know, Whitney?
Uh, I want to know what it feels like to leave this world or what that's like. Yeah, I think when you experience a death that's so profound and one that I would call a natural death, one that when you're old, that feels more natural in the way of
Sure.
life. But when someone young is kind of stripped from this world before they're ready and the world is ready to let them go, especially as a young person, your view of life is entirely different after that. Um, so I've become very spiritual, I feel like, in the aftermath, and I just want to know what that's like to cross over and, what does he see? And is he able to miss people? Was his transition peaceful? That's something I struggle with because he was on hospice for 22 days, and before he died, it wasn't a peace. I like what we observed was not
Sure.
peaceful to us. He was on a lot of drugs, so I'm sure it was fine for him, and I hope that, but you just don't know because he
Right.
wasn't able to communicate.
Yeah. No. No, that's good. Let's talk about Whitney. Let's just go to that story. Take us back to Ryan
Hmm.
and walk us through the journey that kind of brought you to this point.
Okay, so do you want me to start from his accident or after he passed away? Because there's like, I
No,
feel,
I think the accent is I researched for you what it kind of just struck me at how this kind of came from something that people go through all the time and doesn't necessarily take their lives,
hmm
right? The bee sting.
hmm
So I would, if you don't mind, like walk us through, like he came home from the gym, I believe, right? And wasn't feeling good.
Yeah, so that day, so it was October 14th. That was a Thursday, 2021. It was 2 days after Ryan and I had celebrated our 8-year wedding anniversary. I was 26 weeks pregnant with our second son. And on our anniversary, I had purposefully scheduled an ultrasound so we could, because we both took the day off, so we could see the baby together, and just thought that we went out to lunch in Doylestown where we live, and just like an ordinary day 2 days before. And on the day of his accident, I was working from home. He was off and he was really into working out. So on his days off, he would always go to the gym, CrossFit gym that was 10 minutes from our home. So he went to the gym. I believe he went to the police station. He was a canine officer at Hatboro Police Department, to hang out like he usually did. It was like, you know, like um like a hangout session every time he went. So he would even go on his days off. So it was like a social party.
Sure.
Um, because the most, his when you're on duty like that for so long as your friends are working. So he was there. I don't know if it was before he worked out. I think it was before. So he worked out, and then on his way home, I'm assuming the window to his car was cracked. I can only assume because I didn't get the full story. I wasn't able to get the full story from him, but um, I can only assume that his window was cracked. He got stung on the inside of one of his arms, and then he drove home. He was completely fine. in terms of how he felt when he first got home and I saw him and he was saying hi to me. He was on the phone with one of his best friends, Steve Plum, who passed away actually 3 weeks after Ryan's memorial and 6 weeks after Ryan passed away.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah. So, he got off the phone with Steve and started talking to me just like, like a regular day, nothing going on. And then suddenly he just said, I feel really weird. And when you're with someone for so long, you just know when something's wrong in their voice. And
Yep.
I don't know what it was, but I mean, all the hair just stood up like all over my body. I got the chills and I just knew because he told me that he had gotten stung and I just knew what was going on. So I knew he was having anaphylactic shock. And I got up and immediately called 911 and he went downstairs. I asked him before he went downstairs and before I got someone on the phone, can you breathe? Because that's obviously what my concern was about. Because I'm thinking, he's he's having a reaction, like we need to protect
Yep.
his airway, like if something is swelling. Um, so I don't know what was going through his mind. I'm sure he was terrified. I don't know exactly how he felt, but he said he felt weird. And I'm on the phone with 911 frantically trying to find Benadryl because I'm just thinking like he needs to, chug something before the EMS gets here, like to help. And I'm frantically looking in the cabinets while I'm on the phone with 911 and they're asking me questions. And, I pull out, we only had children's Benadryl. So I'm like cursing. And I don't know if we can curse on this
Now
podcast,
you can
but
say what you want.
I'm
You
not
already got
saying it.
chocolate cake and coffee with you on your island. You can do what you want, Whitney.
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely not holding back on the curse words while this is happening. And Ryan went downstairs, and I have tunnel vision at this point, so I don't know where the hell he went. I just remember seeing his back going down the stairs, and his arms were stretched out. He was a tall guy; he's like 6'2". So his arms were completely stretched out on the two walls going down our stairway and his canine Louis was following him frantically. Like you could tell, Louis was nervous about what was going on, and I just knew something was wrong just by looking at how he was going down the stairs because he was kind of like stumbling,
Hmm.
like he either was disoriented or dizzy or I don't know. And so I'm thinking, oh, this is really bad and I'm still on the phone with 911. And how I'm explaining this is it sounds long-winded, but this is all kind of happening at once.
Sure.
So
Yeah, yeah, it
it
goes
was
quick.
very quick. So finally I'm kind of snapped back into reality because the 911 operator says, well, where is your husband now? And I'm still upstairs in the upstairs bathroom. And Ryan is, I don't know where he is. So I go, oh my God, I don't even know because he had gone downstairs. So I frantically fly down our stairs. I'm looking all around in the kitchen, our playroom, our living room, screaming for him. And I don't know where he is. And then I see the door to our front door is cracked open and I just fling it open. He is on our front. We had one step up to our porch and he's sitting down, slumped over him and unconscious.
Mm.
So I think I threw my phone on the ground and I put it on speaker and I just knew that I had to like start giving him CPR. Like he's not obviously not breathing or not breathing well. So he's a big guy. I'm 26 weeks pregnant. I'm 5'2". I'm trying to put him on his back so I can do whatever the 911 operator is telling me. And like I'm trying to slowly bring his body to our stone porch. And so I did that probably not as gracefully as I would have liked because he's just he was
Yeah.
just a dead weight at that point. And the operator said, what is he doing now? And he was struggling to breathe. I could tell he was just gasping for air. So she told me to start chest compressions, which I did. And I'm screaming at this point, like, help me, um, into, the front, um, where our driveway is and where the road is. And it was just so weird on this
Yeah.
one day. We have a very busy neighborhood. And on this one day, there was just no one there, like no one walking their dogs. Like it was very odd. And it was October 14th. There was just one of those autumn days that was really like unusually warm.
Mhm.
And I just remember the thickness of the air while I'm screaming into like it felt like an abyss because no
Yeah.
one could hear me. I felt like everything was being drowned out. And the neighbor behind us, for whatever reason, that day was doing something with like a saw. So it was that saw was drowning out my screams, so
Oh,
no one heard me. Um, it was like the perfect storm where to make it so no one could help me. And I was just so concentrated on helping Ryan. I didn't even I an option like leaving him was not an option.
yeah.
So to run to get a neighbor or something, I
Yep.
was like, I not leaving him.
Did you know
So
had he had episodes with bee stings before? Did you know he was this allergic to them or?
he had been stung before. So this was not like this wasn't something that he should have been concerned about, something
Right.
that I would have been aware of. Like this was a new thing. He had been stung in adulthood, he had been stung in
Mm.
childhood.
Okay.
So very rare.
Wow.
Just like a perfect storm of events, what happened in his body for this to happen.
Sure. So
Um,
eventually the paramedics get there with you?
Yeah, so finally the ambulance gets there. I have no idea how long it took them. It felt obviously like forever, but I'm sure it was probably like 5 minutes. So during that, the interim, he starts foaming at the mouth, which is something that happens when you're going into anaphylactic shock. So I just instinctively like picked him up and put him on his side, so he wouldn't, choke on whatever was coming out. And then finally the ambulance got there and I saw them and they were running towards me to help me and Ryan. And I just ran off the porch so they could do whatever they needed to do, um, to help him. And Ryan's canine Louie was outside and obviously freaking out because he has no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
Um, so he's jumping like frantically, and the EMS is like, "You need to get control of your dog." And, I'm beside myself and I'm like, "I fucking know." So, and I just remember saying that because, I was just beside myself. I had no idea what was going on. So he wasn't wearing a collar because Louis never really wore a collar because Ryan had a very good control over him and he didn't need to wear a collar at home. So I'm trying to drag this dog that is frantic into the
Sure.
house and it's not happening. So I had to run in, get a collar for him, put it on, and like I launched him into the house at like
Yeah.
26 weeks pregnant, like 100-pound German Shepherd, because I was the only one he would have let do that without him like
Right.
biting somebody. Uh, so I slammed the door behind Louie and I just ran off the porch and let the EMS do what they needed to do.
Okay. So they end up at the hospital. You guys end up at the hospital and they got his heart beating again and stuff, right?
Yeah, so I didn't know what was going on. I was in shock. A police officer was trying to calm me down and get information, and I was not being cooperative because I was just like in shock. I
Sure.
and so he's trying to focus me, get medical information, get our names, all the he was just trying to do his job. So I finally am calmed down a little bit and giving him information, and I just suddenly say like, "Is his heart beating? Like, is he alive?" Because I'm thinking he's dead.
Yeah.
Uh, so he goes and checks on him because I don't want to see them working on him. So I'm kind of like to the side on our
Yeah.
driveway. Uh, and then he comes back and says, his heart's not beating, but they're working on him. So I just remember leaning on my car and kind of like hyperventilating at that point, and he's trying to calm me down because I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
And um, so he goes, well, they're gonna take him to the hospital. So like, let's go. So I get in his patrol car and I'm just praying just praying that his heart starts. And we get to the hospital and the same police officer goes and checks the status of Ryan because they got there after we had. And he told me that they were able to get Ryan's heart started, but I knew he had been down for a
Mhm.
really long time. I didn't know how long at that point, but I just knew it wasn't good. Um, and that kind of started this 6-month journey of different hospitalizations. Ryan was in the ICU for 7 weeks. Him going to rehab in and out because he wasn't physically strong enough at one point to go through the intensive therapies that Moss Rehab was putting him through to try to get him cognitively better. And then eventually, I believe it was probably February when Ryan was not getting better cognitively that we started conversations, me, his sister, and his mom about, what would hospice look like because as a young man, 35-year-old man, we knew, and he wasn't just any man. He was this very, had a lot of pride and he was very physically active, the father, and we knew that he would never just want to be on display,
Yeah.
not being able to take care of himself, like not even knowing what was going on around him, just literally just a body.
Yeah.
And we didn't want him to be, he was like trapped. So we wanted him to be free. If he couldn't be free on earth, we wanted him to be free, in heaven. And even though that meant saying goodbye to him physically here,
Hmm.
um, we did decide to put him on hospice, but we had to get all the ducks in a row before we could announce it to the world. So
Sure.
we had started discussions in February, and I don't think we announced it until March.
Yeah.
And Ryan was discharged from Moss Rehab to hospice on March 17th, 2022. And then he was on hospice for 22 days before he passed away.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm sorry for your loss and for that journey there. I mean, that's definitely nothing that enters into our conscious of what's possible at such a young age in marriage and raising families and stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely the farthest thing from what I had imagined my life would be like right now.
How did you, if you don't mind sharing, how did you handle the ups and downs of that process, the highs of the hopes for recovery, and then kind of working to where you're like, okay, this isn't changing. How did you work through that?
So it's a hard question because when Ryan was in the hospital and up until when he passed away, I know that I was just, and I know um, Ryan's sister and his mom would agree, we were just in survival. I mean, we were getting thrown things every day that, you know, can you handle them? Like, no, you can't handle them, but you have to.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember people saying to me, "You're so strong," and it felt so weird for them to say that because I didn't feel strong at all. I felt the weakest I ever felt. I felt out of control. I felt devastated. It was survival. Like it was literally just doing what was necessary moment by moment. And you start feeling, how did I get through that time? I mean, you feel really numb. Like I started feeling so numb because that, as I've learned, and I kind of knew instinctively, like I felt nothing a lot through that process, especially towards the end. because I was protecting myself, and you kind of become this person that you don't even recognize anymore because you're just going through the motions because you have to, and there's no other way but through. Um, so at first, uh, you know, it's a lot of shock and complete sadness and devastation right after his accident, realizing the damage of what happened in terms of the deprivation of oxygen to Ryan's brain and the damage that it did, and then the ultimate prognosis. And the thing with the brain is you don't really know what the prognosis is, but they can do imaging and they can give you an okay idea of, this is really bad imaging. We don't know what that means. We don't know if this, the bad imaging equals a bad outcome. We can't say that, but you know what a bad imaging means.
Right.
It's not it
Not what you
doesn't
want to
feel
hear.
good to get that. Yeah. So being thrown all of these truths that you just don't want to hear. I think in the beginning it was more anger, frustration, shock, sadness, very, very deep grief. And then you get to the point where that is all so heavy and extreme that your body and your mind doesn't let you stay there forever. And then you start feeling nothing. So that it's like a progression, because you can't feel that terrible for that long
Sure.
because you will just like not be able to function.
Right.
And your body and mind are so smart and they try to protect you, and that's what happens.
Well, and then you also went through the birth of your second child during this time.
Hmm.
So you're balancing all of that on top of this.
Yeah, and that was another event where I felt really like it was just I had to do this thing, and there was no joy or excitement attached to something that should be joyful and exciting, um and it wasn't. It was just like something that I had to do
Yeah.
because like I can't be pregnant forever. And I think there was just a lot of, again, you go to this place where you feel kind of numb and you're just like going through the motions because you have to survive. And that's where I was. I remember on the day that my son was born, um, I had tested positive for COVID that week, and I didn't know I would have to have him that week. But during pregnancy, I get this really weird condition called cholestasis, and they don't let you go beyond a certain time if you develop this. And I was starting to get symptoms like that week that I had COVID. And so I had to go in and I had to have a C-section. And so I was still testing positive, even though I was, pretty much well when I went in for the operation. My support person I had chosen was my sister-in-law, Morgan, and she didn't know, but she also had COVID.
Oh God.
So she could be in the room, my hospital room, but she couldn't go in with me like we had wanted her to be in the operating room with me. So I was alone during that operation, which that
Yeah.
doesn't feel good.
No, I can't
um
imagine.
so I just remember them telling me that, and obviously I was scared and anxious and just so upset, but like I just remember going into that zone of like numbness because I had
Yeah.
to just survive that day, survive the operation without completely breaking down.
Wow. So when was it in this journey that you decided your story is destined to inspire people and to give people hope through some of their darkest hours? Was there a moment that came to you and you're like, okay, this can't be what the story is supposed to do?
Mhm. Yeah, so on the day that Ryan died, April 7th of this year, I just remember we were at Ryan's cousin's house because I didn't want him to be on hospice in our home because we have, our toddler, and I didn't want him to have this association of his dad dying in his home. So his Ryan's cousin graciously allowed us to have hospice in his home. So the day that Ryan died, there's such a thing. It's called anticipatory grief, where you start to grieve the death of someone, even though they're still here. And a lot of family members where their loved ones have like terminal cancer, they start that grieving process earlier than the time that their loved one passes, and it is almost like a protective mechanism because you know what's going to happen. So your brain and your body are already preparing you for
Yeah.
that. So I was going through that starting in October, because that's when I essentially lost Ryan as my husband, as my
Sure.
best friend, as my co-parent. So I had been grieving for quite a while when Ryan was put on hospice, and so I was processing. Uh, and the day that Ryan died, I was ready to start my new life because I had been through literal hell for 6 months. And I just wanted to go home with my boys and try to find happiness and peace again. And it irked me. And I know that sounds so bad. This might sound horrible, but I hated that when people were hugging me and telling me sorry, that they had such pity in their eyes. And I never wanted anyone to feel sorry for me because I didn't choose this life. But
Right.
I knew on that day that I get to choose now what I want to do with this experience. And I can either be a victim of what happened, and no one would probably fault me for that because it's a really
Sure.
shitty situation to find yourself in. But I know that life is so fragile and it's so short. And I know, and I knew in my heart that I needed to make this into something that had meaning. So I knew this very early on, like on the day that Ryan died. I was like, no one is going to look at me like a victim.
Yeah. No, that's very, very strong and very powerful statement. I don't think anybody would judge that negatively. I think I admire it, right? Like you went through the process, you were ready to move on, and you got a responsibility to raise two young men still,
Yeah.
right?
And I felt, because of who Ryan was, he was such a strong person, so loyal, so smart. He's so much life, and he's so funny. And I knew that to honor him would be to live a beautiful life. And I know that's so hard for people when they lose somebody, because they're the ones that are left here and they're the ones that have to pick up the pieces. And sometimes it's more comfortable to stay in that sadness, and that grief. I call it griefy feeling, instead of kind of picking yourself up and trying to live joyfully again, because you feel like your connection with that person who has passed is tied to the sadness instead of the joy. And I just, in my soul, that's not how I feel connected to Ryan. By feeling joyful is how I feel connected to him.
Yeah.
So I don't know why that was a gift that I feel like he left me with that a lot of other grievers don't have. But because of who Ryan was, he left me with that. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic perspective right there. Yeah, I love that. You couldn't have said that better, Whitney. That was very well put. That is the strength he left you with.
Mm-hmm.
How are the boys doing in this year?
The boys are doing, gosh, they're amazing. My
Yeah.
son Jackson, who's almost 5, he's just such a powerhouse. I mean, he's just like Ryan. Like he's just like Ryan. It's
I love
amazing.
it.
Like he's just stubborn, too smart for his own good. He gives me a run for my money every day. Um, and it's been hard for Jackson because he doesn't fully understand the permanency of death.
Yeah.
And I think finally, because he's going into his fifth year, this happened when he was 3, which is so crazy because so much time has passed. Um, he's finally starting to realize more of the permanency, but I feel like he still thinks that Ryan could walk in the door at any moment, and having to explain that, when things come up and he says, I miss daddy, or, why is he taking so long? Like, I have to explain to him, like, he can't come home and why that is. And, it's harder on me than
Yeah.
it is on him because he's just this innocent little boy. And he can't fully grasp it. So, I have to put aside my own, I guess, desire, or I have to get out of my own comfort zone when that happens, because I don't want to have to explain these really hard things to him because it's really hard on me, but I
Sure.
can't be selfish. So I have to explain that to him a lot. And we've been told that as he develops, as he grows older, that, this is he's going to process things kind of every step of his development.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm going to have to explain these things at every stage, in different ways, that's age appropriate. So, that's part of the journey. It's part of navigating this life of loss after losing a spouse with young children. Like, you just, especially with one that knew Ryan, because with Leo, he never
Right.
experienced Ryan as a healthy man. Like, he got to meet, quote unquote, Ryan, but he never interacted with him because Ryan was never able to interact with him because he was already in this state, this like comatose state when Leo was born. So it's going to be different for both of the boys, how they're processing, because, in one hand, Jackson has to kind of grieve that person that he knew, but that's hard in a way because it's like he knows what he lost, where Leo won't have that same experience. But then, he didn't get any time with his dad. So it's hard for both of them. It's going to be hard for both of them in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, it's a forever journey for them while they're growing up.
Hmm. Yeah.
So Whitney,
Yes.
what would you one of the things you said in preparation for this interview that really stuck with me is that you want to help people thrive through grief rather than succumb to it.
Hmm.
So what would you share as like one or two key things that have helped you to emerge from grief and a place where you can thrive and share that with the world? What are like two things you would recommend for any of our community members that are going through something similar to implement in their lives?
Yeah. Gosh, that's really hard. I think the most important thing, I mean, I've thought about this a lot, like what makes me different than others who are having trouble getting to that place. And honestly, I think it's mindset. Like I shared, moving from a victim to a victor mindset is really difficult, but it's also what has enabled me to move forward in my grief journey. It would have been really easy for me to be like, you know what? I just can't deal with this. Like, I need to shut away, not talk to anybody, just do what I need to do with the boys. Not do anything to help other people, just go back to my old life at being a lawyer and doing all that stuff. But I didn't want I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be the hero of my own journey. And that meant, I guess this is kind of the second tip, not only changing your perspective of what has happened to you, but also putting yourself in really uncomfortable situations. Because when we're grieving, we, we have the tendency to want to make ourselves comfortable because we don't want to feel bad. We don't want to
Yeah.
feel sad. So we numb ourselves. Um, but either if that's, staying in bed all day, watching Netflix, or sleeping all day, but that's not how you move forward. you have to kind of practice getting back to your life, even though it's really hard. So, I mean, that's why my boys were so instrumental, I feel, in my grief journey, is because I didn't have the luxury of having the decision to be like, I don't want to like join the world today. Like I didn't have a choice. Like I had to join the world. Like I had to drop them off at daycare every day and say hi to people and like put on a face. Like
Right.
I didn't have a choice, but honestly, that's that was really healing because eventually all those things that you used to do in the life before your loss becomes natural again. Whereas before, it feels like like climbing Mount Everest every day just to like go out the door to drop your kids off at daycare because you're like, I don't know if I can even say hi to somebody without breaking down. But
Right.
because I had to do that day after day after day after day, it started feeling okay. But if I didn't have the boys, I could have made the decision to not do that. And that's just an example, dropping them off at
Sure.
daycare. But I tried to do things like that I did before Ryan's accident, like working out again, which is something that has always been really important to me. So that was a priority, is putting my physical health and my mental health above anything, because I
Yeah.
knew that if I couldn't be physically okay, um, I can't take care of my children.
Yeah.
Like, how can I be a good parent if I am not physically and mentally healthy? So, working out, and working out is it's so cathartic, but it's also really hard because it does bring up those really intense emotions when you're moving
Sure.
your body like that. So I purposely put myself in situations where like I would feel really intense grief and I let myself go there. Whereas I feel like other people, they stray away from putting themselves in positions where they're going to feel that grief. And
Yeah.
I think that really hinders them from moving forward because you have to feel it
Yeah. I
in
think
order to
that's,
move forward.
yeah, I think that's very powerful. I think not just in grief, but a lot of in our society in general, we try to hide from emotions that have negative connotations. We only want the happy, smiley, sunshiny days. We don't want to admit there's rainy, cloudy, gloomy days too, but they're essential
Mm-hmm.
for us to feel. So I think that's very powerful, Whitney, is to allow yourself to feel it and sit with it. Then,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, you also move through it.
Yeah, you
And
have to move through it.
yeah, and realize that you going on to have a healthy, productive, vibrant life in no manner demeans the memory of your husband. Right.
No.
It's what he would want. And it's what he would want for the
Mm-hmm.
boys is for you to live a very high vibrational life.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think sometimes when we lose people, we almost feel guilty if we move forward, if we put ourselves ahead of the grief, if you
Mm-hmm.
will. And then people, just like you said earlier, people end up spending years grieving what was instead of learning from what is.
Yeah, and it's so hard because you grieve the loss of a life that you'll never have, the one that you had a plan to have for so long, and it's not possible anymore. And I understand, and I can completely understand why people feel like that, because I mean, I go there sometimes too.
Yeah.
But you have to be, and maybe this is not popular opinion, but like I was hard on myself in the fact that I said, I kind of talked to myself like how I have to explain things to my son Jackson, which is very literal. Like, Ryan's not coming back. Like, he's dead. Like, I'm not going to see him in this lifetime. What am I going to do? Like,
Mhm.
am I going to make this life a beautiful life, or am I going to just live in this past and just be a shell of a person? And like for me, living a beautiful life, like that's my only option.
I love it, Whitney. I love your strength. I love your rawness and your vulnerability to share with us, quite honestly, while it's still fresh in your life. I mean, it is very courageous, and I applaud you for that. And now running in Trauma Stilettos, which will come out early in 2023, is
Mm-hmm.
going to take the readers through your journey as it progresses. And like you
Oh,
said,
sorry, you broke up
that
a
break
little
up,
bit.
it's going to take your readers kind of through your processing in a very raw and vulnerable way.
So the book, it's a memoir. So it's really it is. It's going to take the readers through the processes of, what we went through. It's a retelling of what happened, but also my mindset and mental status when all this was happening, my emotions, and actually what happened because so much happened behind the scenes that I didn't share during the time because it just wasn't. I couldn't share anything
Sure.
during that time. Like didn't have it in me. um so by sharing the story, I hope that people will see themselves um in the story and not feel so alone if they feel maybe an emotion that they didn't think would come up in their grief or trauma story, or journey, that maybe they maybe feel guilty about, that might not be, I guess, the movie version of what grief and trauma looks like, which is
Yeah.
very romanticized. There were some things that came up during the ordeal that I'm like, wow, this feels really weird. Like I don't this doesn't feel comfortable. Like, why do I feel this way? I thought I would just feel sad and despair and the grief. Like, why do I feel resentful? Like, and that, so I go into all that
Yeah.
because I know that if I went through that, other people are going through that or went through that. And I want people to feel seen because it's very grief and trauma. It's such a lonely journey. And you
Yeah.
have to do it. You have to do it by yourself. You have to go on this journey on your own. Like no one can do it for you. No one is going to save you.
Yeah.
So
You're very right.
so this book is for anybody that has gone through it, is going through something similar, and for those people that I say have lived a charmed life like I did for so many years, and they don't know how to effectively and properly kind of deal with others going through grief and trauma. Like, some people think it's about saying the perfect words, and there are no words
Yeah.
when something like this happens. It's just witnessing somebody in their grief and being with them, meeting them where they're at. And that sometimes for the person that is witnessing the grief is very uncomfortable. But like putting yourself in that uncomfortable position because there's nothing else you can do. And that's the best thing you can do with somebody that is grieving is just be with them. Like, if someone's like curled up on the floor, like go down on the floor with them. Like that's what I mean by meeting them where they're at. Like that's how, but that's not fun. That's not like bringing a lasagna. Like that's easy.
Right. No, you're true. Very true there. All right, Whitney, as we wrap up, one, I want to thank you for trusting us to share your story and for coming on to become part of our community. And two, where can our people follow you? Where would you like them to follow you to stay up to date on your story as it evolves and to be part of your community?
Yeah, sure. So your listeners can find me anywhere at Whitney Lyn Allen. I am on Instagram. I am on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on TikTok, and my website will be launching soon. So everything is at Whitney Lyn Allen, Allen.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Whitney, for joining us and for trusting us to share your story. And we can't tell you enough what an honor it is.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.